Well, I think a big part of what's going on with the MCU, outside of the identity politics, outside of the bad writing, part of this was inevitable. It's suffering. Same thing with Star Wars and many other franchises. It's suffering from franchise burnout, and part of it is because it became so big. 2018, 2019, the MCU was everywhere. And how long can this was, I say was, not is now, but this was the biggest franchise in history. And it's inevitable. Eventually, the general public is going to get sick of it. And the problem is they've compounded that by, well, I guess it didn't help that their first movie in Phase 4 was based off a character that they'd already killed. But lackluster movies, terrible TV series, even the effects on She-Hulk. I'm like, it's and you can even tell that from the franchise itself. It's kind of like where Star Trek was, say, back around 2005. You can tell everybody behind it is burned out. And I don't think it's going to get any better. The only way you can save something like this is to have it go away for a bit. And my the rule I go by is that British show should have done is go away for at least 5 years. But no, you're still hitting people with movies. You're hitting people with, God, was it 5 or 6 TV series now? It's like, I don't want to watch them, even if it wasn't for the identity politics issues. I'm burned out on it. I think a lot of people are burned out on it, and that's a major problem with Disney Plus. The two franchises that they're relying on more than anything else, being Star Wars and the MCU, they're both burned out at this point. And the only MCU movie that was successful was based on nostalgia from previous eras before the MCU. So I think it was going to come to this, but I think they've made it worse with the way they've approached it.
See, I disagree that it's burnout. I think it's simply terrible storytelling and terrible writing. And I mean, even look at something like Game of Thrones. Now, I didn't really watch House of the Dragon just because I was so burnt by Game of Thrones season 8. I didn't think it was going to be very successful. Holy shit. That they could, all they did, what did they do? Good storytelling, good character development, and you won everyone back, generally speaking. Obviously, it didn't quite hit the numbers that Game of Thrones season 8 hit, or some of the previous seasons, but it still won people over. If the MCU had the right mindset at the end of Endgame to develop the next phase of the MCU, it really was, Gary was right, MCU. Like, they had an agenda to push identity politics and not tell good stories. Same with Star Wars. Star Wars will be successful if it's done right. It just will. You've just ruined it so bad. I guarantee you tomorrow, if they blow up Lucasfilm and they get the right people in there, the enthusiasm will be through the roof. If you start bringing it back and you start developing stories that people care about, Star Wars will be a $2 billion film franchise the next film they release if they do it right.
I think an advantage that Star Wars had, or Game of Thrones had, kind of what I was saying, or you need a little bit of a break. There was a 3-year break between House of the Dragon and season 8. I think had House of the Dragon come out maybe even 6 months later, I think it would have been a disaster. So that's why I think part of the problem is when you keep throwing, I think at one point around Endgame, they had, 5 movies within a year? I think when you throw so much at the audience, they become sick of it. Whereas if you take your time, and I'd say even maybe a 2 or 3 year break for the MCU might be a good thing, like finish Phase 4, take a break, then go back to it. People will be interested in it again the same way we were with Game of Thrones.
I agree ages, in that,
right?
I think the smarter thing that they should have done was after Endgame, they should have done what you've suggested, is take a break. Maybe not for years, but for several months at least, not produce any more movies, no TV shows, and then really take the time to let people recharge their batteries, really plan out the next phase, and kick it off with a bang. But it's like, what did we get? We got Black Widow, which is like you said, a character that's already dead, and it was a flop anyway because it was a shit film, and that pretty much set the tone for what Phase 4 was going to be. And then it just became this almost frantic rush to get as much shit out there as possible. It was like It was like watching fucking Mike Zero or something. It's just like, gotta make more content constantly. It doesn't matter if it's garbage and meaningless. It doesn't matter. Just more.
Hey,
And
my channel is under attack right now, Gator, all right?
Just on the burnout thing, just very quickly, because I think the burnout isn't just with the audience. I mean, the burnout is also with the writers. House of the Dragon is kind of unique in two respects. It's based on pre-written source material, and it's the only Game of Thrones spin-off that's come out. So not only has there been a long break between Game of Thrones and House of the Dragon, it's the only thing they've had to work on, and they've had the roadmap set out for them by the guy who actually created the franchise.
But
And
they did have that Blood Moon as well, which got shit canned after like the pilot because it was so terrible. Apparently.
I missed it. Was so bad I missed that completely. The problem, I think, there's a sort of lack of confidence maybe with Disney and the MCU in the sense that I think they probably thought, well, if we wind down, not only will we make less money because think of all the opening weekends that we'll miss if we stop making content, but there's also the replication crisis, and it's not just that they're churning out content; it's that everyone is trying to copy them. So principally the DCEU, obviously, and I think there might have been the fear of losing ground against a revamped DCEU. So you have to keep going with the content to keep that sort of place of priority above what DC is doing all the time. And I think you can kind of draw a broad analogy in sort of films go in eras, that they go in sort of ages. You have the age of the Western, where the Western emerges in sort of the 50s and 60s. It's incredibly successful. Then everyone does them. And the burnout isn't just because people have run out of stories to tell, and it's not just because the audience is bored of them. It's because everyone is doing them. And so everyone has to keep doing them to keep on top of their rivals. And so by so doing, they've run out of steam. You go to the 70s and 80s, and Star Wars really kicks off this sci-fi revival. Everyone does Star Wars sci-fi stuff. If you've got Star in the name, they called Battlestar Galactica because it had star in the name. You carry on with sci-fi and you get burnout from that as well. Then you get fantasy in the early 2000s with The Lord of the Rings, and everyone keeps doing that. And these things sort of just go in epochs. I don't know really that there's a huge amount that anyone can do to stop that sort of progression of time. And it might just be that we are in the dying embers of the superhero era of film. Maybe no one's going to improve on this. Maybe you can't do any better.
I genuinely, personally, I'm done with it. Like, it just doesn't hold much interest for me anymore. I think there's always that quest for innovation, isn't there? There's always that desire to give each movie a unique selling point. You know, it's like the first whatever character, or it's a unique spin on the superhero genre, whatever it might be, something that you can use to market your film or your character, whatever it might be. And it feels like we're reaching that saturation point now where it's like, well, every major avenue's been explored already. Like, where can we possibly go from here? And yeah, it ties into like what you guys have been saying, that sometimes a break is needed. You know, sometimes you need to just like take that step back, let people recharge their batteries, give them a rest.
Cynical point of view, maybe, but I'm still, out of all the perspectives here, I'm with Jeremy. I think that if they were good, nobody would give a fuck. Nobody would be saying this fatigue. I remember a certain video about Thor: The Dark World from, I think it was Red Letter Media, I'd have to check, where they talk about how it's official, superhero fatigue is set in, nobody cares anymore. And it's like, it's hilarious to look back at Thor: The Dark World and think, oh yeah, that's where fatigue was setting in. Yeah,
I think, look,
imagine the narrative around.
About,
sorry.
I'll be quick. We all talked about No Way Home, and we watched that, and it was like, holy shit! Like, this is a reminder that superhero movies can actually be quite investing. And if you've got good characters, good actors, there's a kind of interesting gimmick to play with. It can get you sucked in, and you can enjoy it. It can still work, but man, those things are just becoming rarer and rarer now.
Yeah, I mean, imagine the narrative around House of the Dragon if it sucked. It'd be like Game of Thrones is over. No, we can never, they would never need to make another. And because it's well written. And again, I'm basing us on everyone else is saying that, but it's not that we need a break. It's that they need to slow down. Like, why was Star Wars so special for so long? Because it was an event when it happened, because it was every few years, obviously the big gap. But like when you got the prequels, it was like, okay, we got the first one, or you go back. There was an event around the Marvel movies when they first started to come out. They took a few years, but now they're filling in like all these gaps with all this dog shit. It's not that they need a break. It's that they need to slow down and stop just like Drinker said, Mike zeroing the MCU.
Yeah.
It's just way too much content, and it
Yeah.
doesn't feel special anymore.
It's a streaming thing.
It is the
it
streaming thing,
purely-
but sorry.
No, I'll let you go.
Oh no, I was going to say that's sort of like the compatibilist position, which is that you're right. It's not a hard-coded law of the universe that movie fatigue sets in, or that you're right to say it is bad writing fatigue. I completely agree with that. But the question is sort of the underlying systemic one. Why is there bad writing fatigue? Well, that's because of bad writing. Why is the bad writing bad writing? What is it about film studios and their writing teams which is producing this kind of thing? And it's the underlying question that produces bad writing fatigue. So bad writing fatigue explains why the audience is sick and tired of this stuff. It doesn't explain why that phenomenon is arose to begin with. And I would still be the pessimist and say that that's because it's a deep underlying thing that no one can fix. But I would agree with the bad writing point.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like Stranger Things. I feel like we were starting to get Stranger Things fatigue for season 3.
Yeah.
Because why? Because it wasn't good. And suddenly 4 comes out, and it's good, and everyone is in love with it again, and everyone's talking about it again. And so that's kind of where I just look at it. And I mean, I felt the fatigue for Stranger Things because I was like, this isn't good. I don't want to watch this anymore during season 3. And now we're back at it with season 4 being good.
Yeah, because, like,
No,
you know,
that's
like,
a really
if-
good
if-
point, actually. And
If Western
that-
fatigue set in at one point in history, it's like as if these days I give a shit about Western fatigue. I was just like, if you give me a good Western, I'll watch it. I don't
Yeah.
care if there's too many Westerns
But
or
then,
whatever.
but then you didn't live through the 50s and 60s where you were probably getting like you go to the movies and like fucking every movie that was
Well, no,
playing
but I
was a
lived
Western.
through the 90s, 2000s, 2010s, 2020, just constant superheroes, and I am still. If all of you guys said, "Oh, that new movie Captain Manpower came out and it's really good," I'd be like, "Oh shit, okay, I'll check it out." And if
Yeah.
it was, I wouldn't then be like, I was going to enjoy it, but man, just too many superhero movies. So
And we're only like 10 months, because I think it came out around Christmas. We're 10 months removed from No Way Home hitting almost $2 billion at the box office. So there is, and obviously a lot is to that with Toby and Andrew Garfield coming back, but obviously that did crazy numbers. And I think it does come down to a little bit of both worlds, really. Stop shitting out the constant garbage, but also if it's good, people are going to support it. But with the MCU, you've seen nearly every single box office release post Endgame have very similar results in terms of that first weekend drop off. You're seeing consistent 67, 68, 69% drops in that second weekend. It's because that's how Marvel and how Disney have like trained their audiences. Hey, it's a big event. It's a big event. You got to go see it first weekend. You got to go see it. You got to go see it. Well, it comes out and then, all right, well, I guess let's get ready for the next one. That's like the attitude and the attention span right now of the audience that they have trained.